What I want to do in my few minutes allotted to me is just say a little bit about Raymond Williams's work in adult education in the late 1940s and 1950s. Just offer some thoughts on how his work as an adult educator shaped his wider contribution to the study of culture and society. And it seems to me that Williams shares something, not necessarily politically, with figures, major figures in modern Welsh history, such as David Lloyd George and Aneurin Bevan, in having travelled a huge distance politically, intellectually, and from their social class, yet have retained something of their origins in terms of the way their activities and thinking were deployed later in their lives. However, let's just have a quick look then at Williams in adult education. He worked for Oxford University, but in effect for the WEA in the south of England, in East Sussex, from 1946 up until the early 1960s, and taught English literature, something which is quite important, I think. Some of our modern day preoccupations around the purpose of adult education were similar preoccupations of Williams and his colleagues. There was a constant tension and indeed a constant worry that adult education was being directed towards vocationalism and skills for the workplace and so on. And there was always a risk that the wider cultural purposes and the teaching of humanities as a whole was going to be, was under threat. So Williams saw adult education at its best as something which could drive social change, contribute to social change, rather than something which simply filled a gap into society or addressed those areas where there was some kind of deficit, where people needed skills for work or second chance education in that sense. As adult educators, we all find ourselves professionally marginalized because we're distant from the large institutions of schooling, obviously, but the large institutions such as universities. We're often operating at the margins, working hand to mouth and so on. We're not necessarily part of the wider professional cultures. Williams was very aware of that, and he used it as a strength, I think, in order to bring that marginal perspective on his wider work as a teacher of literature. Adult education, by definition, is deeply grounded. You have to meet learners on their own terms. This is you're working with learners who have their own life experiences. That kind of response you get from adults with real life experiences shapes any adult educator. And if you want to theorize it, that is what Williams meant by knowledge isn't simply imposed from above. It's something that is co-produced in an adult education class. Williams drew a sharp distinction in adult education practice between the notion of social conscience, why one does adult education, why adult education is necessary. It can be argued, and there's some moral worth in this, that one does adult education, one advocates for adult education because one has a social conscience, that we need to take education to the masses. Williams said a better term to understand why adult education is necessary is the building of social consciousness. So we're not missionaries as adult educators. We are seeking to work with adults in an educational setting which helps them understand their wider position in society and the wider, in his case, literary world and the world of humanities. So in the context of humanities and literature, if, for example, Williams was teaching the novels of Thomas Hardy, he wasn't bringing the Matthew Arnold's kind of approach, which is to say, this is what Hardy wrote about, isn't it wonderful? He would bring ideas about Hardy, which says this is how Hardy explored what it is to be human. How does that correlate with your own experience of what it is to be human. What is literature's role in exploring what it is to be human, to exist in a human society with real communities? Williams constantly was drawn back to ideas of community and place. And Williams did point to a very deceptively simple aspect of adult education. That is, it is simply a convivial act to learn with other people, particularly to learn in person with other people. And bear in mind that in person could mean a setting like this. We're learning together, hopefully, in person this morning. So Williams had a lot to say about politics. Adult education is being moved funding-wise into the world of economics alone in terms of skills for jobs and so on. If adult learners are able to, if we use adult education to stimulate adult learners to equip themselves to understand their place in wider society, we're not able to do that unless culture remains a significant part of the curriculum. So we should advocate continuously for that wider, more humane curriculum rather than one solely driven by skills for work and so on. Williams placed power and democracy at the core of his thinking, and also social class. His emphasis on culture didn't mean a complete rejection of economics and class as key driving factors in the way societies operate and change. That at a time when we have more graduates than ever before in Wales and the wider UK, never has the distance been greater between graduates and non-graduates. And that's playing itself out in those cultural aspects of contemporary politics, it seems to me. But we all need to work together to make that case about the democratization of knowledge and who has access to the knowledge and understanding that are produced within our institutions. I think there remain opportunities for us as adult educators to deploy that marginality in a creative way that Williams did. We need to see it as a strength and use it. It allows opportunities for us perhaps to be radical, to be more progressive, to be braver in taking on institutional power structures and conservatism where those things exist. So we need to understand Wales as it is and ground adult education, our practice and our curriculum content within Wales as it really is, and acknowledge the weaknesses. These are things which call upon us as adult educators to modernize our practices and seek to address the way that communities are being remade, where our economy is being remade, rather than run to practices and forms of adult ed which worked maybe 40 or 50 years ago. We need to retain the groundedness of adult education. That's its biggest strength, it seems to me. The fact that in any learning situation with adults, the learning takes place, the tutor experiences the learning as well. It's a shared endeavor. It's a co-production. That is adult education at its best. We need to be assertive, even at times aggressive, in making that case with funders and challenge them, challenge ministers and so on, to understand why that wider groundedness and the absolute necessity of a wider vision of what adult learning could be is essential if we are to meet the challenges that face us in Wales today. Diolch yn fawr.